You know that feeling, right? Completely exhausted, but your mind just won't switch off? That wired but tired state? On the outside, you're still a high performer, getting things done. But inside, it feels like you're about to break. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And there's actually a name for it.
Yeah, that one hits pretty hard, doesn't it? See, this isn't about giving up or being lazy. It's about a system that's just under way too much strain. You're still hitting your targets, everyone thinks you're doing great, but the internal price you're paying is just becoming unsustainable.
And that's what we're calling quiet cracking. It's this invisible struggle where you keep up appearances, but inside, you're eroding. Emotionally, you've already checked out, you're basically running on fumes, and the engine is really starting to sputter. And if you feel this way, I want you to know you are so far from alone. A recent report found that more than half, 54% of employees are going through this exact same thing. It's become a silent epidemic, mainly because on the surface, everything still looks perfectly fine. So here's what we're going to walk through. We'll look at the biology behind this feeling, what's actually happening in your body. We'll map out the stages so you can kind of see where you might be. We'll also touch on why we get into this cycle of overwork. And then most importantly, we'll cover some real, actionable protocols for repair and what that road to recovery looks like. Okay, so first things first, we have to talk about your body's stress system. And this is probably the most important thing to get. Burnout is not a personal failure. It's not a weakness. It is a predictable biological process. Your body's stress response system is simply overwhelmed. Let me introduce you to your HPA axis. Now, don't worry about the name. Just think of it as the command center for your entire stress response. It's the thing in your body that decides when to hit the gas and when to slam on the brakes. So what happens when you're under constant pressure? Well, that command center, it starts to malfunction. It gets dysregulated. And what that really means is it forgets where the off switch is. Your body just keeps getting flooded with stress hormones like cortisol, even long after the stressful thing is over. And all that time spent in the on position, it has a cost. It leads to something called allostatic load. That's just the scientific term for the wear and tear on your body from being in a constant state of high alert. This is the biological reason you feel wired but tired. It's why you have brain fog or feel anxious for no apparent reason. Okay, so we've covered the biology, but what does this breakdown actually feel like day to day? Let's map out the stages of burnout. You can think of this as a quick way to just check in with yourself and see where you might fall on this spectrum. So here we're looking at a couple of different models, but let's just focus on that column that says what it feels like. It often starts with what they call a honeymoon phase, right? You've got high energy, you're driven to prove yourself. But then it starts to shift. The stress sets in. You might feel more jittery. Maybe you start skipping breaks or meals. To really simplify it, the emotional journey often looks like this. You go from that high energy drive to feeling kind of jittery and anxious. Then cynicism starts to creep in. Your hobbies start feeling like chores. That's followed by a kind of numbness where you're just going through the motions. And finally, if left unchecked, you can hit a total collapse. So the big question is, why do we push ourselves this far? Well, it's not always just an internal thing. A lot of the time, our biology is just responding to our work environment. There's a really powerful link between our nervous system and the culture at work. Let's talk about your amygdala. It's your brain's ancient built-in threat detector. In a work environment that feels psychologically unsafe, with constant criticism, tight deadlines, or just a general fear of failure, this little alarm system stays switched on. Your brain starts to perceive your job as a constant, low-grade threat. And here's the problem. When that threat alarm is always on, it basically blocks your vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is super important. It's what sends the all-clear signal to your body. It says, hey, you can rest and digest now. So when it's blocked, you physically cannot fully relax. You're stuck in survival mode. Okay, so I know this might sound a little bleak, but here is the good news. You can fix the machine, but you can't just think your way out of it, especially in the later stages. You have to physically repair your nervous system. So let's look at some clear protocols to do exactly that. It really comes down to 3 core strategies. First, we need to manually stimulate that vagus nerve to tell your body it's safe to relax. Second, you have to retrain your brain's emotional center. And third, it's about strategically detaching your sense of self from your work. Let's focus on that first step, Because there are things you can do right now. These are simple physical hacks to manually trigger your body's relaxation response. Splashing cold water on your face is one. Humming, seriously, the vibration helps. Or even just focusing on your breath and making your exhale longer than your inhale. All of these tricks help activate that vagus nerve.
Now, as we get close to the end, it is so important to be realistic. Recovery isn't an overnight thing. Healing is a process, and the timeline really depends on just how depleted your system has become.
For a mild case, where you've caught it pretty early, you might be looking at 1 to 3 months of active recovery. But for severe cases, we could be talking 6 to 18 months, often with professional support. This just highlights how serious this biological state really is. So let's end with this, because it's the most important takeaway. If any of this has resonated with you today, please know this is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that your biological system has been pushed way past its limits and is in need of genuine repair. And finally, a quick but important reminder. This content is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. If you are struggling, please make sure you consult a qualified healthcare